So wolves are like your classic like night owls.
They would have developed anxiety, because of the trouble sleeping.
Hoping that, maybe I'll finally fall asleep, after laying in bed for like, say, 3 hours, 4 hours.
So sleep chronotypes refer to like one's natural preference for sleeping and waking. So it can influence your productivity, what time you sleep. It can influence your meal timings. It's more like our subjective kind of circadian rhythms that we experience. So like what you may know as chronotypes would be like, oh, are you like an early bird or are you like a night owl kind of thing. But then I went on this website called the Sleep Foundation, right? And then they showed like there are many more animals than just like early bird or like night owls. Yeah. So they have like lions, like bears, and dolphins also. Yeah. So lions is like, there are people who are early risers and also early sleepers, right? They are more productive in the mornings and then they sleep earlier. Yeah. Then bears make up about like 55% of the population, where like they will they follow like our conventional like work kind of schedules, where they wake up in the day and then they are more productive in the afternoon, and then they sleep at the usual standard times, which is about maybe 10 plus p.m. Yeah. And then you have the wolves. So wolves are like your classic like, what do you call it, night owls, yes, right? Wolf. Yeah, your wolf. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So they are more productive in the night time, right? And then dolphins are more of like they are like the light sleepers. How you say, they might have trouble sleeping. They are a bit more easily roused, that kind of thing. So when I did the quiz, I'm like the dolphin kind of thing. I'm like light sleeper. I don't generally have a productive time per se. It depends on that day and what I'm doing.
More situational.
Yeah, more situational kind of thing. So, so it really depends, right? Like, let's say if like you are like a wolf, right? And then you have to, and then when you're young, you go to school, right? And then you have to.
Yeah, it was a terrible time.
Yeah, you have to follow, right? Yeah, it's like you have to follow the timings of more productive in the morning or afternoon, which is very hard for us, right? But for, let's say, like the lions, right? And when it comes to late night social activities, they will struggle because, it's like their time to sleep already, that kind of thing. Yeah. So that's you.
That's you.
Yeah. So chronotypes are more of like the subjective kind of circadian rhythms that each person has, right? But circadian rhythms are more of like our internal biological clock that happens, that regulates our alertness and our wakefulness.
Okay, so insomnia disorder is diagnosed when someone complains of deficient or non-restorative sleep. So this may manifest in terms of having difficulty falling asleep. It may manifest as them having trouble staying asleep. It may also manifest with them having very early awakening and then having trouble falling back to sleep. Yep, so these are the three subtypes. They would need to have experienced trouble sleeping or the above difficulties for at least 3 nights per week for up to 3 months in order to have that diagnosis. Typically, when I see clients with trouble sleeping, the first group of them sort of present with insomnia being the primary problem. So that's the main trouble, but they would have developed sort of anxiety, because of the trouble sleeping, right? So one sudden unexplained night of sleeplessness may turn into, a few nights in a row, and then progressively that becomes a pattern over weeks and months. So we know that actually the occasional, most of us would have experienced it, right? The occasional sleeplessness is a common occurrence, but it seems that for individuals who are more sensitive or more prone to worrying, right, that one night can very often sort of make them more sensitized, right, to anticipate more difficult nights. So they start to sort of become very vigilant to their internal signals, right? Anything that might suggest, okay, this is going to be one of those nights, right? And or they might replay, a difficult night in their head, or they start to catastrophize, the daytime consequences of not falling asleep. So, this sort of sets them up to become more aroused at bedtime. So then they have more difficulty falling asleep.
Stephanie, you mentioned that you have all these examples of clients, right? So I was wondering, like, do you have one client that really stood out to you in terms of like insomnia or sleep issues?
I think the thing about insomnia is that it's never just a sleep issue. Very often they're intertwined with emotional and psychological factors, stresses, sometimes in the ongoing current day. Sometimes it may seem to happen quite innocuously. So one client that I guess stands out is, someone who she's in her 20s, and has never had sleep problems. And, I think suddenly sort of had a night of difficulty sleeping. And when we kind of traced it back, sort of a lot of that had to do with sort of childhood trauma of having experienced grief, losing, a parent around the time that she first, her earliest experience of losing sleep, and that was when she was very young. And then that seemed to resolve spontaneously at the time. And then, in her recent adult years, I think mom was visiting, and then mom had left for abroad. And then that's actually when the onset of her insomnia started. Yeah. So that, and understanding that and kind of being able to sort of link that for her was quite reassuring, because I think for the longest time, she kind of struggled to sort of understand, why is it happening? Why did that happen? Yeah, so that's one group, clients that I had. I think another group that are common, that we see in our practice as well would be the ones with depression, anxiety. These are conditions that often present, comorbidly with insomnia, and so very often, the short-term use of sleeping medications would be used, because oftentimes, they haven't had a good night's sleep, so it's even hard for them to sort of think clearly or even to engage in the work, right? So usually sort of the psychiatrist would have started them on, some sleep meds so that they would at least have a good night's rest in probably a long time. And then obviously, not just treating the insomnia, we treat the depressive and anxiety symptoms, and what works best, as with most conditions, is a combination of the medication and also psychotherapy. And usually, in those, for those clients, just adequately treating the depression, anxiety does resolve the insomnia, but it's not uncommon as well that even when their depression or anxiety are treated, they may still have sort of residual sleep issues that warrant being the focus of treatment.
Okay, so as with many conditions that we might be familiar with, there's never just one factor, right? What causes a condition is usually a multifactorial sort of situation. And with insomnia, very often there's a combination of biological factors, genetics, age, life transitions, stress, anxiety, so many things that can kind of precipitate the onset of insomnia, right? What keeps it going, however, is also a combination of, behavioral patterns that we engage in, thinking patterns that sometimes also exacerbate that anxiety about insomnia. So what typically happens in a case of someone with insomnia would be, for whatever reason, they have an initial night of poor sleep. So they experience a poor night of sleep, and then they start to be like, oh no, if I don't get enough sleep, if I don't get 8 hours of sleep, I can't function at work tomorrow. I'm going to be in trouble, I'm going to get fired. Then we start to catastrophize. What that does is it puts us in this state of hyperarousal where we're kind of like threatened. We feel like, oh no, something bad's going to happen, right? And that's very activating, which makes it hard for us to relax. And sleep kind of requires us to be in that state of relaxation, right? So when we're activated, we almost feel like, oh no, I can't sleep even more, right? And that feeds back into the bodily tension, the anticipation, and that apprehension about sleep, right? What happens after that is we start to engage sometimes in compensatory behaviors, that are supposed to help. So for example, sometimes what we like to do is to maybe nap in the day. We start to take long naps. Or sometimes what we also do is to kind of go to bed for hours and hours. We just stay in bed hoping that, maybe I'll finally fall asleep, after laying in bed for 3 hours, 4 hours. But actually what that does is our bodies get used to being in bed and staying awake. So that kind of sabotages the sleep even more, right? And then because of this cycle, we almost become convinced that, oh no, I'm doomed. It's like my sleep's always going to be bad, you know, I can't get a good night's sleep anymore. And that feeds back into that cycle of that insomnia, right? That can be very distressing. So there's so many factors that kind of maintain it. Sometimes lifestyle habits are also things that, you know, so for example, for people who tend to want to self-medicate because, you know, we feel like, oh, I can't sleep, let me grab a beer, right? Because alcohol is a depressant for your central nervous system, right? So we start to feel like, okay, I'm a bit tired. Yeah, exactly. And then we start feeling a bit more relaxed and you feel like, okay, I can fall asleep. But what happens with alcohol is actually once your body starts breaking it down, at the second half of the night, is your sleep becomes even more broken and disjointed, right? So the quality of your sleep decreases, you start to wake up because you need to, you know, go to the toilet, for example, after that drink, right? So things like that actually exacerbate sleep problems. Yeah, so lifestyle changes are also part of the interventions that will be necessary to treat insomnia.
I think also there's this new term that came about like revenge bedtime procrastination, right? Like it's like in the day we work so hard, we don't have the time to enjoy the things that we really want to, and then we compensate where at night we'll be just like, oh, let's just scroll through that one TikTok video,
Like binge watched.
yeah, like one more Instagram post and all this, but then one more becomes like 1 hour, you know. Yeah, so it's like we really want to gain control of the time that we thought we didn't have in the day to, you know, to do the things we want. Yeah.
Sometimes also things like, you know, behavioral patterns that we engage in. So let's say we're tired already, right? We feel like, oh, I haven't been sleeping well, you know, I don't have the energy to do the things that I like to do. So let's say we used to exercise, we used to go out and meet friends. Then we stop doing those things because it's almost like we're on power saver mode. Yes. Right? But because in the day we don't expend energy, we don't exert ourselves at all, we just kind of, you know, hole up at home and feel like, oh, I just need to, you know, keep my energy for myself. And that actually perpetuates sleep problems because when we don't expend energy, we don't do stuff, we don't feel fulfilled, we don't feel engaged, and the sleep quality continues to be not great. Yeah.
Just like a vicious cycle.
Yeah. Okay, so with insomnia, very often one thing that we notice that's very visible is actually our cognitive functioning, right? We start to find it difficult to focus in school or at work. Our memory gets affected, right? We feel like we can't pay attention as well as we want to. And sleep is actually essential for consolidation of memory as well. So whatever you learn in a day, it's moved to your long-term memory when you're sleeping. So without that process going on, our learning gets impacted, so we also don't feel like we are mentally as sharp, right? The other thing that gets affected is also our health. So you probably know, you know, health. Our bodies require sleep to get restored, right? The cells actually, on an individual level, cellular level, go through cleansing and removal of toxins during that sleep process as well. So without that, very often it would affect how we're feeling as well. You know, energy levels, even the choice of food that we make, you know, in the day gets impacted when we are sleep deprived. So people who are sleep deprived have been shown to consistently choose foods that are higher in calories, more sugary sort of stuff, and that also actually has a long-term impact on obesity. So there is a relationship between sleep deprivation and obesity as well. Things like Alzheimer's disease is also associated with sleep deprivation. The other thing that gets impacted is also our relationships. You know, studies have shown that, you know, in spouses that are not doing so well, right? In couples that are not doing so well in their marital relationships, sleep deprivation is a common problem. It's one of the key contributing factors, right? Because when you're tired, sleep deprived, I think we all know we would kind of be cranky, snappy, our threshold for things are just lower in general. We feel more anxious, we don't think as well as we would want to, right? So naturally that all kind of plays into the consequences of insomnia as well, affects your relationship. And we are less likely to go out, just now, right? Like I mentioned, we conserve energy, we turn our friends down, we don't get to do the things that we want to. So that impacts our mood as well.
I think even for couples with different sleep chronotypes, that can be a clash really, because then it will determine what time they sleep, what time they wake, and then if there are like these incompatibilities, right, then it is very disruptive for even their sleep quality even. And that's where it can lead to conflict and all that. So, yeah.
Okay, so cognitive behavior therapy, CBT for short, is an evidence-based treatment for actually many psychological conditions. CBT for insomnia is premised on the similar principles of how we think about events, right, evoke certain emotions which affect our physical state or physiological responses, whether your heart's racing, you get restless, which of course then drive certain behavior responses. So when clients can't sleep, their minds are usually worrying about, the different things that we typically worry about, but specifically or very commonly about worrying about not sleeping, right? So, sort of when they can't sleep, then again, much like Anthea's mentioned, right, that they're thinking and they're catastrophizing what's going to happen next day. I'm not going to be able to cope. I'm not going to be able to function. What's going to happen? All the what-if questions bubble up at that moment. So in CBT, what I teach my clients is to watch their thoughts, right? So instead of automatically, reacting to these negative thoughts that surface, right, they can question them, whether they're facts. We teach them to sort of decatastrophize, right? So, okay, if I'm not able to sleep tonight, would that really be a problem? We'll point them to, again, instances where actually, it's not going to be pleasant, right? It's not going to be, comfortable if I haven't slept, but, I've turned up to work, after difficult nights, and I've still managed to get through the workday, right? I don't have anything pressing that demands me to be at 100%. So actually, can I, be okay? Can I accept and can I tolerate functioning at my 50%? And that usually eases the pressure of trying to get to sleep.
Yeah, and I guess in addition to cognitive sort of interventions, right, there are also behavioral changes that would target the behavioral cycles that we mentioned just now, right? So things like stimulus control, those things include, using the bed only for sleep. So not lying down, scrolling, like many people enjoy doing. We're all guilty of that sometimes, right? So things like that, it breaks the association between the bed and wakefulness, right? Making sure that we get out of bed if we can't sleep. Right, that allows us to also condition our bodies to recognize that the bed is only for sleep, right? Having a nice, pleasant sort of sleep environment, a winding down routine that helps our bodies to know that, okay, sleep is coming, And then we prime ourselves to be in a state where we can invite sleep, right? Because sleep is kind of elusive, It's something like breathing. When we think about breathing, then we feel like, oh my gosh, I can't breathe properly, right? Sleep is kind of like that, It's something that happens automatically. To every one of us, right? So when we are able to kind of get into that state, right, to invite sleep, that's when sleep will be more likely to happen.
I think when you talk about breathing, right, like breath work, right, as much as we can control our external environment through using the bed only for sleep and all that, but we also have to also look into managing our internal environment, right? Which means it's like using the breath to focus and to be present in the present moment, right? So this is where mindfulness comes in, right? Instead of fighting and struggling against like the thoughts that we have that, oh, why am I still not sleeping and all that, right? We accept and we let go of the fight, because essentially it's the struggle itself that is causing the lack of sleep and difficulty sleeping, right? So if we, rather than doing that, we actually accept and let go and say like, okay, now there's a thought that, oh, why am I not sleeping? Oh no, now there's a feeling that of frustration, or like, oh, I'm feeling like heaviness in my chest, or like anxiety fluttering in my chest. Yeah, so naming all these thoughts and feelings and bodily sensations that come in, right? And being like a scientist observing all this, rather than being immersed in them, right? It can help the body to go into this state of calm and peace, instead of that very stressful fight or flight response that doesn't make us ease into sleep.
You're like almost embracing them, receiving them with open arms rather than actually trying to fight them off. If you've tried all the self-help and self-care strategies and you're still struggling with sleeplessness on a frequent or regular basis, then it's worth getting proper evaluation done by a psychiatrist or a psychologist. sleep issues are very treatable, and they're often intertwined with emotional and psychological factors. Even just understanding what's led to the onset of sleeplessness, what keeps it going, often offsets, the powerlessness and the anxiety that people with sleep issues experience. Yep, and that can be sort of, again, investigated and identified, over the course of treatment. Yep, and then as with, many conditions, early intervention is always promises the best results. As Anthea and Shermyn have sort of shown or described, the ramifications of insomnia or not sleeping well are so broad, and sleep is such an integral part of our lives that it really is worth, sort of investing, in to try and get the best sleep that you can.
So it really depends on what is making me not be able to sleep at that time that I use the relevant strategies that help. Yeah. So I think even for exercise, right? Like I know like the common advice, right, is like to exercise in the morning and not at night, so that you not affect your sleep, right? But for me, I find that it's very hard for me to exercise in the mornings. I just cannot wake up to exercise in the mornings. So then I will exercise at night. But then I find that the type of exercise I do, right, like I tried to do like HIIT exercise, and then I really couldn't sleep because my whole body was just like feeling so hot, and the heat that is there, So HIIT doesn't really work for me, but rather if I do like Pilates or more moderate intensity kind of exercises, right, then it does help for me to ease into sleep. But this might not help for maybe somebody else. So it really depends on what works for you, I guess.
Yeah, it's very individual. Yeah, for me, I've just learned to ignore, advice to sleep early and wake early because, again, my chronotype, it's not, my chronotype is the wolf, right? So brain is actually more alert as it gets later in the day. So, when I've tried to adhere to that, what ended up happening was sort of staying up, getting frustrated and anxious about not falling asleep. So, I've tried to sort of match my work routine, exercise routine to my sort of circadian rhythm, right? So that, it's easiest for me to sort of fall asleep and get up. The other thing that, that I do as well, that I've tried and that actually has worked very well is to actually change my alarm, sort of the ringtone to a more pleasant sounding one, so like a jazzy sort of tone. Because we've talked a lot about, making your sleeping environment and routine as comfortable, as pleasant as possible. I think, it's also worth thinking about making your waking routine as pleasant as possible, right? So rather than being sort of startled awake by a very jarring ringtone, right, choose a track that's nice, that you like waking up to. So that actually has also made it easier for me and to get up in the morning.
Yeah, for me, I think my one experience that I used to struggle with is whenever I travel, right? It's a foreign environment. It takes me like 1 or 2 nights to be able to actually sleep properly in this new like hotel or wherever, right? So it used to stress me out. It's like, we're gonna be out and about the next day, and you have no energy, and then it actually really makes me stay up the entire night. I have had holidays where the first 2-3 nights I'm just like, zombie fight. Yeah, but what I've learned over the years is to actually just be mindful about the whole process, kind of be non-judgmental. Nobody can force sleep, right? So just kind of recognizing that, I can't force sleep even if I wanted to, and being compassionate towards myself, right? Recognizing that even if I'm a bit tired, there's a good chance I'll still enjoy myself, right? And just creating that space for sleep to occur, and then it'll happen when it happens without so much pressure. Yeah, I think that in itself has been quite a life-changing sort of approach, right? Even when I go to new environments, new places.
So the occasional sleeplessness is normal, and especially if you've had a stressful period, you're going through certain adjustments in your life, you're traveling, for example, it's normal, and it's good to sort of anticipate that, expect that, make room for that, rather than sort of insist that, okay, my sleep has to be like my usual routine.
Looking into your sleep hygiene, behavioral modifications and lifestyle changes first as a first line into addressing any insomnia or sleep issues would be preferable.
Yeah, and with any strategies, right? Different strategies will work for different people. So give yourself the chance to try different ones before you decide which one works for you and which one doesn't work so well.
If you do, and if you're considering, sort of medication, that should only be sort of short-term, temporary use, because sort of we know that sort of tolerance, you can become dependent on it, and over time, of long-term use, right? You may need more to sort of get the same effect. Right, so that should only be short-term, considered as a short-term use.
Always go back to your doctor's advice again, right? And because your doctor will be able to assess and treat you according to what you present with.
And if any of the strategies that we've described don't work, don't give up yet, because sometimes, again, what needs to happen also is to kind of figure out, how to sort of tailor it or individualize. Maybe some processes just need to be sort of changed or tweaked